and not be able to help them. He wasn't even allowed to catch the crooks looting downtown businesses.
I watched this guy loot Nike Town, sit in the window of Nike Town. At some point in time, the employees of Nike Town were chased out, and they came running to us for assistance, and what we wasn't allowed to do anything.
Detective Lowe has, well, half the answer right. He's got half the picture in his hands. Certainly, it's horrible, it's inexcusable that city leaders under the control of the federal government in Seattle would instruct the police not to apprehend criminals while they were engaging in crimes publicly. Crimes like robbery, arson, and assault. That makes the police chief, the mayor, the Justice Department, the Delta Force, the FBI, you name them, running this operation guilty as accomplices. But in a second, Detective Lowe falls for the old trick we've been talking so much about. Problem, reaction, solution. He says, you know, we were attacked out there for a day. But, you know, later the city got it together and we went ahead and declared the emergency. Why, we had the no protest zone. Yeah, half the city. Why, the civil emergency was needed. And we finally, you know, we got to get tough on them. Yeah, you got to get tough on all the peaceful demonstrators that were shutting down the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and now when people think of protesters across the country, especially city leaders, city managers and others say, boy, we better crack down. We better ban protest here, too. And they're passing ordinances across the nation to implement emergencies whenever they feel like it. And the federal government is rubbing its hands together. All started by 30 to 40 anarchists running around, burning and beating and smashing and stealing. And the police, like dogs at the end of a chain, a Rottweiler you've been slapping, suddenly had their leashes released, and with wanton abandon, they rampaged out in a berserk fashion and attacked old ladies, store owners, you name it. And then they got to ship everybody to the FEMA Center. That's right. FEMA was helping during this learning process for everyone. Wake up, police. Stop letting them manipulate you.
Even though the department has been criticized for the so-called no protest zones, Lowe defends them as necessary to regain control of the city.
I think our biggest problem here was leadership within this department refused to take appropriate actions when it was clearly necessary. And that's how it got out of hand.
You see, police, things were meant to get out of hand, to train the public to live in a continual state of emergency. Martial law is not some Hollywood pronouncement. It's an incremental slide towards more and more control. And on a scale of 1 to 10, on the police state Richter scale, we're at a 4 or a 5 right now in America.
While the labor march was large and peaceful, it was the unexpected violence that captured most of the media attention.
There's 3 issues of mischaracterization that have been sort of compounded by ignorance that I really think need to be addressed. Number 1, the civil emergency was created by the police. The police did nothing but stand there until there was enough property damage, and then suddenly there was a civil emergency. Now this occurred, and I have to add also that the emergency meeting of the City Council on Monday, I want to thank the 3 members who actually voted not to endorse the mayor's proclamation of civil emergency. But I find it very disappointing that there was no debate on the actual merits of the civil emergency. Everyone just said, oh, well, it's quite clear. Media reports say that the negotiators in front of the King County Jail want a real concession from the police by granting access to attorneys to the people who are being held in the prison. This is not something to negotiate. This is a right. And it took a court order. It took a court order to even get to that point. And I'd like to know what state the police and the jail system is in when this can happen to nonviolent protesters who are simply being held. And we were told beforehand that in meetings with the police that no one would be held at Sandpoint for more than half an hour. Now, I don't think that was realistic. In fact, that's such an Alice in Wonderland kind of thing to say that I don't really have a response to it.
I am very upset that my civil rights were suspended by Mayor Paul Schell so that WTO delegates could convene in our city. My freedom of movement was restricted, and I was subjected to harassment and arrest by police. I was also subject to an excessive fine and 180 days in jail just for trying to protect myself from chemical poisoning by owning a gas mask. This private property was subject to confiscation by the police. A no-protest zone was created, which made it impossible for citizens to peaceably assemble and exercise free speech. I do not appreciate being gassed when I'm trying to get home from work or when I'm trying to shop downtown. I was nowhere near any of the demonstrations. Both times I was tear gassed. I suffered headaches and sinus pain for days afterwards, and I was forced to seek a physician's care. I also witnessed clouds of tear gas wafting out over the reservoir on Capitol Hill where our drinking water comes from. I would like the City Council to look into the effects of chemical poisoning of our water. Just because a small group of vandals caused property damage downtown on one night, it does not give the city government or Governor Locke the right to deny my personal liberties and to gas law-abiding citizens. Every time there is a Super Bowl victory party, a World Soccer Championship, or Halloween in Detroit, much more property damage results. This has nothing to do with politics. Nonviolent civil disobedience is a very American tradition. Martin Luther King Jr., Henry David Thoreau, Harriet Tubman, Rosa Parks. Without public protest, we would still have slavery, and even white women would not have the right to vote. I would want the City Council to look into the federal government's role in these events as well. These protesters were held at a FEMA installation at Sandpoint, and I'd like to know what happened to the foreign nationals who were arrested, and are they in trouble with the INS? Thank you.
There were people who were willing to get arrested because they knew what they were intending to do might be illegal. They might intend to block an area. But instead of arresting those people, an entire community was assaulted with chemical substances.
Those here claim riot police attacked people on the street indiscriminately. Whether they were a protester or a resident living nearby, it didn't matter. Riot police attacked people on the street indiscriminately. Riot police attacked people on the street indiscriminately. Indiscriminately.
The medical bills are going to be enormous for me.
I attempted to get help. The gentleman who said that there were people guarding the windows. There were peaceful demonstrators guarding the windows. There were also those of us who broke off from them, attempted to get a police officer. Mind you, the police officers who were standing a dozen-fold behind seated demonstrators with their arms linked, who quite obviously were not going anywhere, and I don't believe weighed over 100 pounds, any of them. I could not get one of them to break away to help me stop the violence that was going on. I want some answers. I definitely want some answers. I am very, very angry in that regard. But I think they ought to be reminded they are public servants.
Right. We're about to get to hardcore evidence proving that the Federal Emergency Management Agency, that secret government system, was actually running the show. But first, even more evidence that the city was aiding and abetting the criminal anarchist.
We've all witnessed the confrontations over the past few days. At times, it's hard to tell whether police are protecting citizens or threatening them. When two apparent Good Samaritans stop to help a fallen woman, they all get pepper sprayed. Even media members weren't spared.
If you thought the anarchists who commandeered a privately owned downtown building were out of town now, well, think again. As Cairo 7 Eyewitness News reporter Christina McKenna has found out, they're still here and still living rent-free.
Susan, when these anarchists moved out of the building behind me on Saturday, a lot of people thought they should have been headed to jail. Instead, it turns out a lot of them just headed around the corner, and they're now living in a building right over here where they're enjoying electricity, hot water, and heat, all rent-free.
Saturday afternoon was a celebration here. 7 days after they commandeered this downtown building, anarchists walked away without a word from police.
It feels to me like we won.
And at least some are still winning. As part of the deal to get them to surrender this building, anarchists were offered housing just around the corner at the same price. The building is owned by the Low Income Housing Institute, a private nonprofit that is in large part funded by the city and is now working with the city to house the anarchists.
First of all, with criminal trespassing, if that was me or you or the average person on the street, we'd be in jail.
John Satoli can't believe the anarchists aren't in jail now. As a lawful tenant in the building the anarchists had seized, he was locked out of his packaging and shipping business for a week during his busiest season. Satoli can't believe he's now contemplating bankruptcy, and the people who put them there have paid no consequence at all.
They walked away. They walked away, and the city of Seattle, low-income housing, moved them across the street on me and yours taxpayers' dollars.
So why didn't the police department arrest the anarchists when they moved out of that building? Well, that's a question a lot of people are asking, especially since the West Precinct is just down the block. We asked the police department this weekend. We asked them again today. They still haven't returned our call with an answer.
The riotous behavior I saw was by the Seattle Police Department, the Washington State Patrol, and the Federal Bureau of Investigations.
From the city's standpoint, we had security. And at least 20 agencies were involved. We had the lead, but clearly the Secret Service, the FBI,